a joint deep down in my heart. I'm waking up with your love from the start. I'm chasing the rainbow through the rain. I know it's gonna be a beautiful day.
I don't know if you've noticed or not, but many times God can do incredible things with things that we would never dream of. Many times He can bring even a divine song from devastating times and even depression. Today, that's what our guest is going to talk about, a new song. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee. You know what it stands for, Coffee, conversations of friends of faith to encourage and equip. I'm Kim Crabill, so delighted to have you joining us today and so excited about today's message. You know, in the world in which we live with social media, there are so many friends racking up, right? Oh, I have 2,000 friends and I have 500 friends and I have all these friends. But who do you call when you're feeling lonesome? Who do you call when you're feeling depressed? What do you do in those times? You see, statistically speaking, we are in an epidemic of loneliness right now. We don't have those people to reach out to. We don't have those people that really know us. And so sometimes that can become such a depressing state that we don't know what to do. Well, today, hopefully through the message and the songs of our guest, maybe we'll be a little bit more willing to reach out and see that even in down times, God has a good message for us. So to talk about all this and to share some amazing talent and songs and new songs that God can bring into our lives is today's guest, Brian Elder. Brian, welcome to Coffee.
Hi, Kim. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. A Christian artist and singer, songwriter. Gosh, you have so much going on. Let's just start with your background. Tell me a little bit about, where you were born, a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Connecticut, but because my dad was in the Navy, so they did the whole traveling thing and stuff. And then I ended up in Virginia when I was probably around 2. I think we spent 2 years in Connecticut. So I grew up in Virginia. And as I know, you grew up in Roanoke, so
Yeah.
you know pretty well. But so I grew up there. I spent most of my life there. I was just in love with music at a young age, and I just couldn't get enough of it. My mom would tell me stories about I'd be in the playground, and I would tell people I'm going to be a rock star when I get older and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that meant or anything, I'm sure. But then as time went on, I ended up moving out to Texas as I got older. I lived out there for 10 years. And I ended up back in Virginia. But during that time frame, I'll just tell you this quick part of it. During that time frame, I had got burnt out from doing music. As much as I had loved it, I had got burnt out from doing it. Didn't want to do it no more. And I went into the film business. And then from there, it was 2019, 2020, and I battled with depression and anxiety. And that's when I wanted nothing to do with music, by the way. So at that point, I just had no desire to chase it, no to seek it or anything. I probably barely picked up my guitar, and God had different plans. So He brought me through that with music again. So
That is such an interesting story because you knew that it was a love. Was there anything that happened that caused you just to get burnt out on it, or did you just get tired of it?
it was a lot of I got tired of doing it, but also it became more than something I enjoyed. It became more of more work than anything else, where it was like you had different band members that would leave, or that you would you could no longer have them in there. You needed to replace them or whatever reason, and it's like that was just it was replacing everybody again and replacing different people again, and doing the audition process, and then having to do this and having to get this done, and it just became more work than it was something that you loved and enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
And probably I had to go through all that to get to here, because I love music more now than I did then.
Mhm.
And my favorite part about the whole thing is being able to share, because I was just playing secular music. It was more like, and there was nothing bad in my songs, but it was just I wasn't, I was playing, for myself, and because I enjoyed doing it, I love doing it, which I still do, but it was not for God's glory like it is now. Like I still love it, and I can't say that I don't enjoy it. Like, it's not, like, I don't get pleasure from playing, but it's like, I love being able to share my testimonies and show what God has done in my life. And I love the songs that I'm singing now. And I don't know, it's different. I enjoy doing it more than I ever did.
Well, Brian, were you a believer before the burnout, or when did you become a believer?
So I grew up in a Christian home. My mom, and I'm so thankful because my mom absolutely loves the Lord with all her heart, and you just know it. She talks about now. I grew up in a single parent home, and she just talks about how we were never without food on the table and a roof over our head and stuff. And she's like, I have two siblings. I have a brother and a sister, and so she's like, God always took care of us and provided for us and everything. She's always contributing that to God. And so I grew up in a home like that. And I grew up knowing who Jesus was, and that he died for my sins, and that, he was raised on the third day. And I mean, I grew up knowing all that. And somewhere along the line, I mean, obviously I didn't live the lifestyle, also, but I mean, I did talk to the Lord, and, I don't know how my relationship wasn't as strong as it is now. And especially like going through the depression and anxiety, like that's where I leaned on was to him. And so I grew up as a Christian, and I was baptized, and I just didn't live that life like I was supposed to. And then I would, come back to the Lord, and then I, not live the life again, and then stuff like that. And like, yeah.
I know. I call it the yo-yo factor. It's so who we are as believers, because you have the highs and then the lows, and you hope, and I'm sure you're seeing this in your life, that after a while the downward doesn't go down as far as it once did before it comes back up. And that's the goal with that. And it's actually a counseling principle, that's what we do. It's how we are sometimes. And so it's normal. And so for anyone that's listening today, I want you to know it is normal. What Brian is saying, I've experienced. I'd say everybody around us has experienced that. And we hope that as we mature, it begins to level out a little bit to where there's not such the extremes that we have. Brian, may I ask you about I think, in the world in which we live today, and I mentioned this briefly in the intro, hopelessness is at epidemic scales. We have more attempted suicides. We have more addictions. We have so much going on right now because of this sense of hopelessness and depression and devastation. And, depression, 99.9, that's almost every person.
Wow.
Speaking of women, really is going to have some type of depression in their lifetime. So that's about everybody's going to have to deal with some type of depression, different levels. Tell us about yours, and whatever you feel like telling us, and how you navigated that a bit, and what you would say to someone who maybe is feeling a little depressed. And I know it's hard for someone just to say, well, I'm depressed. That's, needs to be diagnosed, but we know when we're really down.
Yeah. I'd say the biggest thing for me, it was like I just had reached a really, really like far low. And I didn't realize that when I did a little bit of counseling, but it was very, very minimal. I actually probably still need to do counseling because, like the yo-yo effect, but like I did a little bit, very minor amount of counseling. And I remember one thing she said to me was like, she said that it seems like, your depression has been going on for a while. It's not something that was new to you. And I had no idea, but at that point that I hit my low was when I actually realized it. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, I'm depressed. I'm down. And the thing that is the hardest part that I try to tell people is that you're not, like you said, you're 99%, 99.9%, but you're not alone.
Right.
That was my biggest struggle was feeling like I was alone. And unfortunately it was during the time of COVID where, a lot of people were alone. And
Yes.
so I didn't know what to do. And, I mean, I didn't have people to talk to. You become afraid to talk to people. You don't want people to look, to look at you differently, and things like that. And that's why I'm so passionate about speaking about it openly, because I want people to understand that, when you know other people are going through the same thing you're going through, it makes it easier, because you don't feel like, hey, what's wrong with me? Like,
Mm.
I'm never going to get out of this. Like, why am I feeling this way? And what can I do? And so I started researching, like, I started watching videos and stuff, and I saw, some other Christian artists that struggled with it and stuff, and just different things like that. And that made me feel good, because also as a Christian too, that made me feel like, oh my gosh, like, am I doing something wrong? Like, why
Yes.
am I feeling this way? And I kept, and the enemy likes to take your weaknesses, and he will mess with you so hard on your weaknesses, so
Yeah.
hard. He
Yeah.
knows where he can get you. And mine, unfortunately, had to be where it was like feeling alone and depressed, where it was like, I started questioning my salvation. I started being like, am I not saved? Why am I feeling this way? Like, I love the Lord and I want to do his will, but yeah, I mess up every day. Every day I mess up.
Yeah.
I get it wrong more than I get it right. But I know in my heart, I'm like, I'm like, Lord, write it on paper and tell me what you want me to do. I
Right.
will do what you want. I want what you want. But I
Yes.
started questioning those things. I started questioning, my salvation and that sort of thing. And he still hits me with that every once in a while. And I have to be like, you know what? I am holy, righteous, and redeemed,
Yes.
and I have to, like, keep reminding myself that. And it's hard to remind yourself of that, but that's my biggest thing I want people to take away is you're not alone.
Mm.
You have people to talk to. And you know what? Try talking to people. And
Mm.
I know it's going to be hard, because there's moments where I tried talking to people that I thought were close to me.
Mhm.
People don't understand that. They're like, oh, I'm out, and it's like, and that makes it harder for people to talk. And so that's the hardest thing to me was going through it alone and feeling that way.
Brian, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's the breakthrough that we need. And that's what I love to do in our ministry, is find ways to break through these walls of thinking that because we're struggling with something, it causes us to question our salvation, and it ultimately can cause us to give up. And, it makes me think of that scripture. Do you remember the scripture in the Bible where Jesus is walking with his disciples, and the disciples look over and they see the blind man, and they went, "Oh, master, who did something wrong that he should be blind? Did he sin, or did his parents sin?" And that's the mindset that we still are dealing with today. And Jesus said, nobody sinned. This has happened so for my glory, so that people could see my works in him. People just, where do we get this thought that because we're believers, that life is just jolly and great and wonderful, and we're, always going to be that? And we have that mindset, and it can be so ostracizing for us to feel. And then, like you said, the enemy just jumps all over that. I bet you, do you talk about this a lot when you're doing your in concert?
I do. I
Do
talk about it. Yes, I talk about it when I'm doing events, because, and I'll play for youth as well, for like youth events, and I tell them the same thing as our youth is really struggling and stuff with things like that.
Oh,
But it's you had mentioned the who would sin thing and stuff, and another thing that I thought about was David in the Bible. If you go through Psalms,
yeah.
I mean, David goes from being like, oh, wait, and then I want to go from that and tell you something that I would tell people also. But he goes from like being like, oh, my enemies are after me, or I'm feeling this way, and where are you, Lord, and da 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 da. But at the end, here's the key thing. At the end, he says, but I trust you. And I
Yes.
had to do that. I had to be like, no matter what I was going through, I had to be like, Lord, I don't like what I'm going through right now, but I trust you, and I know you have a reason for this.
Yes.
And that helped also, because it was, praising him through the storm. And that's not easy to do. That's so
No,
hard.
right.
But David also was depressed. So that made me feel better too. And then reading that Paul was like, I do the things I don't want to do. and
Yes.
don't do the things I want to do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Paul, you know, so those are helpful things.
Yes. And think about Paul. Think about what his mind had to go through when he started doubting himself, because he was once Saul. And I mean, the mind battles he had to go through to stay steady, and I love that God put all these raw examples in the Bible for us to realize that in this world we are going to have trials and tribulations, that we are in a battle, and that we have to, and I love what you said, we just have to lean into him and not trust our own understanding, but trust him. Just trust him. And that's like you said, it's easier said than done. But in your process, it says that you were sitting and feeling and battling depression and anxiety, and you just felt led to pick up your guitar again. So tell us about that moment and what happened.
Well, I was sitting in my room, and I was just crying out to him and just asking the Lord, just give me purpose, give me something to do. I just wanted to feel close to him, and I wanted to really have some sort of purpose in my life. And my guitar was sitting there. I had it on my guitar stand, and I didn't really touch it much. I'm sure I probably picked it up a couple times, but I didn't do much with it. And I don't know. I looked at my guitar. I just felt led to pick it up, and so I grabbed my guitar and I started playing stuff, trying to write, because I used to write songs years and years ago. And I mean, I did music for a long time, and I started writing something. And when you don't play for a long time, nothing good comes of that. It's like riding a bike again. You're like, you're very rusty. And
Yeah.
so I was like, well, this is not good. But to get to the next part, let me take you back for a second. 2015, I was when I was doing the film stuff, I was in a film writing or screenwriting class. It was at a church. It was at Gateway Church in Texas.
Yeah.
And I was there. We were doing that. And our assignment was to write a letter to God, say whatever you want to say. And so I had written a letter saying, dear God, I thank you for everything I have. I wish I could help the homeless, whatever, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I know those two things were in it. Well, that letter I had posted on a cork board in my bedroom. And so now that you know that, now back to, I picked up my guitar, I was starting to write something, and this was the end of 2019, I think it was, or the very beginning of 2020. And I had nothing good come of it. And I felt led to go get that letter. And so I went and I grabbed the letter off the cork board, and I started using that as like a basis to my lyrics. Because I mean, this is also the first Christian song I ever wrote. I mean, I've written songs where, I had said, I thank God for you and things like that. But like, there was nothing that was like strictly, just either vertical or just, it was, for the Lord, or what he was doing in my life and things. And so I finally had come up with something that I could use as a riff and a melody. And I just used those as my lyrics. But I didn't do much more with it at the time. And then it was about 3 months later, because it was in March of 2020, when stuff started going online for services and everything. And I was in my bedroom. I'm sorry, in my living room, and I was watching a service online of a church that I was going to. And they were talking about Galatians, which that was our series we're working on, which Galatians is a lot about faith, like grace and our faith in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And remember, I was telling you that I was struggling with that, because I was going, oh my gosh, I've got to do more. I've got to be better. I've got to, serve more. And because I started questioning my salvation and why I was, just feeling this way and all that. So I was going through that struggle. And in the middle of the service, I saw these well, I didn't see them, but I heard these lyrics. I saw them, and it wasn't audible. Like nobody, like God wasn't talking to me audible. I've not heard that, but that would be so awesome and scary. But but yeah. So like, but I saw the lyrics in my mind, just for the first part of the song, and I paused the video, and I was like, oh, and I went in my room, grabbed my guitar, I picked it up, brought it out there, and I started playing these lyrics, and they were just like in sync with it. And I ended up finishing the song, and it's called Dear God, but it was the first Christian song I wrote, but that's what got me into it. And then from there, it kind of took a little while before it was like, oh my gosh, I love doing this again. I was just doing it because It was
Oh.
there. It was something for me to do. I was able to write how I felt, and I can tell you more about that later. But like, it was just, but yeah, that's what happened in that moment and got me to where I was writing again.
That is so powerful. I wonder, and I want to I want to listen to a couple of your songs. Um, here's what I want to ask you. Let me think of how do you think going through your depression, downtime, anxiety, how do you think that benefited you in your songwriting?
Oh, well, me personally, it benefited me because I have a much better relationship with the Lord.
Oh.
But I still, I just want to preface this because I don't want anybody going, oh man, like how come I'm not getting it right? I still don't always get it right. I still get it wrong more times than I get it right. There's times where I'll go a month where I don't read I mean, I'll pray and stuff and talk to the Lord, and like I'll talk to him as I'm driving, and I'll just be like, hey Lord, just thank you so much for today, or just a little small talk, like you would anybody else. But there's like times where like a month will go by and I'm not in the Bible, and things like that. And I am a worship leader, so I still stay around it. But it's like and then I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why? And you feel the repercussions, because then you get irritated a little easier, and like you're not like being more Christian like and stuff. And so it's like so I still have those moments, but my relationship still is more. I feel like it's better
Mhm.
now than it was before, because, and I wouldn't want to go back to that. And there's moments where I've told the Lord, just when like if I'm walking and talking to him. When I was in Texas, I had this long dirt road, and I would walk and just talk to him for about an hour and stuff. And I miss that moment so much because I don't have that here. But I told him multiple times, I'm like, thank you for allowing me to go through that, because if it wasn't for that, and I'm just like, thank you for not forgetting about me, for never leaving me, for because I would not want to not go through that. I don't want to do it again. And I
Right.
don't love the way it felt, but for me, yeah, that's what it did for me personally. Is it helps me to realize that, but also it gives me a heart for people who do suffer through that.
Yes.
I don't like to see people like suffering through it, and it's hard to see that. And like, but um, yeah, I don't like seeing people suffer through that. That's hard.
Well, I
And
think and I think it gave you a new voice of hope. I mean, people know when someone's talking to them how authentic they're if I know and if you know that someone has gone through it and they're walking through it, and they don't have to be even completely through it for you to know the hope that they're giving you. And I think that that has to come through your songs. And speaking of your songs, because of time, I'm going to scoot right on. I want our listeners to listen to just a little bit of this. It's called Passenger Side, and then we're going to come back and I want you to tell us the story behind that. So let's take a listen for just a minute.
I've gotta let you drive and hop over into the passenger side.
Brian, this is one of my favorites. I've been listening to all your songs, but tell us give us the backstory of how this came to be.
so I was in a coffee shop in Texas. It was in Spring Branch, and I was talking to the owner about how she opened her business, because we had become friends. I went and talked to her and her husband and stuff, and she was telling me that they were living in San Antonio, her and her family, and she had tried to open a coffee shop. It had been a dream of hers. Like, she didn't know how to do it and all that stuff, but it had been a dream of hers to open a coffee shop. And so she tried multiple times. Each time she failed, but it was nothing that she did wrong. It was just that she had, somebody would rent the building out from underneath of her or things like that.
Yeah.
She finally just kind of gave up on that dream and was like, you know what, that's fine. Well, she ended up moving to Spring Branch from San Antonio, and with no intentions of trying to open a coffee shop. She saw this building. She was like, let's go for it. So she went to open the coffee shop up, and she said that when she went to go open it up, the time she was supposed to open, we had an ice storm that came through, and it was in 2021. Yeah, 2021 of January. And she was supposed to open in February, and we had this ice storm that came through. And I mean, it was all over the news. Everybody heard about it. And it was just, we were shut down. Like, we had no electricity for a week in Texas and certain areas and stuff. And she was not exempt of that.
Mhm.
Well, she couldn't promote the place. And so she also had to push out her opening date. But when she went to actually open it on like a later date, she was like, God, be my promoter. I haven't had time to do anything. I had no electricity, no nothing to do this.
Wow.
She said the day she opened up, she sold out of everything. And I asked her, I was like, well, what did you take away from this lesson? Because it said in life, we always have a lesson that we learn from different things, but it's like finding that lesson and, you know, just using that lesson in your life. And so she said the lesson she had learned was from, you know, giving God control and just letting him work things out in his own timing. Well, I was inspired by that. So I left and I got in the car, and I just, again, like that moment, those moments, God was just giving me lyrics. And I heard, in my mind, I heard, I'm in a rat race, drag race, trying to reach the finish line. I'm in a hurry, worry that I won't make it in time. And I was like, oh man, I like that. So I wrote that down. I got home. I didn't live like 10 minutes up the road. So I got home, I pulled out my guitar, and I started writing music to it. And I started finishing. At the time, it wasn't passenger side. I didn't know what I was writing about yet, but I know, like, in my life too, it's just everything is so fast paced, and, you know, I'm always in a hurry to do things. And even like with the lyrics say, I'm in a hurry, worried that I won't make it in time. But it's like, where are you going? It's like, I don't know what I'm after, and I don't know why I'm always rushing through my life. But it's like, what is the rush? There is no deadline. There's nothing you need to get to. The only thing is heaven, on having that relationship. That's our goal. And so it's like, you know, I don't know what I'm after. Like, those are the lyrics in there, but it's like, that's what inspired that song. And so I went back like a month later after I finished it and was like, hey, I wrote a song off that story you gave me. And so she loved it. I still talk to her. I was supposed to go out there to Texas next month, but I ended up changing plans. But and she has a coffee shop I was going to play at. But
I just love it. I love the stories. You're going to have to come back at another time, because I want to hear all the stories, because I think this shows people so many things. But the one thing is, if you see God in the moment, you know, he's all around us. Dr. Henry Blackaby says, you know, God's always working around us, and he's inviting us into his work. It's just that many times we don't slow down enough, you know, to see it. And so I love that story. Brian, we only have a couple minutes left. And one of the things I want to do is I want you to please tell everyone, and of course it'll be all over my website and everywhere, but just verbalize where people can go to find out all about you.
you can go to brianeldermusic.com. That's Brian with an I. You can go to any social medias at Brian Elder Music. So it's like facebook.com/Brian Elder Music, Instagram.com/Brian Elder Music, YouTube, same thing. So anything social media, it's Brian Elder Music at the end of it. And those are the biggest places to find me. Just on my main website will also link you to all those. I'm on Spotify, Apple for these songs. Merchandise is on the website, and I think that's the only place.
Yeah, and I just, you know, I went in and I just Googled Brian Elder's songs, and I just sat there and listened to them. My husband and I sat there and listened to them. They're just so great. I can't wait to go in and, you know, your website, your merchandise. But tell me, what's coming up? How can we help you with what's coming in your future?
Well, I'm going to do prison ministry in Florida next month in August. And so I am raising funds for that. I'm trying to raise $3,500. I just posted about it today. We've had some donations come in, but those donations are going to help with my travel and my time there, and food and all that sort of stuff. So if you'd like to give, you can always go to the website. You can give that way, or you can join the mailing list. And then the mailing list, I will send out different things on how you can do that as well. If you donate to me personally, I'm not a nonprofit, so it doesn't get, you know, tax. It's not a tax deduction. But the ministry, Life on the Verge Ministries, they are a nonprofit, and you can donate through them if you put on the memo for Brian Elder, and it's a tax deduction as well. But that's what's coming up, and if y'all want, I love playing places and sharing my testimony. So if anyone has any place, I'm open.
I love that. And I already want you at our fundraiser. I love your story. I love your authenticity. I want to thank you for being so vulnerable and honest. I love when people say, hey, I don't get it right all the time. I miss having quiet time. That just humanizes people. And I feel like that's what the world needs, Brian. They don't need people who seem to always have it all together, always get it right, always get up every morning and have a 2 hour quiet time. I mean, that's the goal, but that goal was pretty lofty, and we're still human and we're still working on it, right?
Absolutely.
Still working on it. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for being with us. I just love your heart, love everything you do. And I know the audience will, I know you'll hear from our audience. So I will be following up with you to do some future things.
Awesome. I would love that. Thank you, Kim, so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Well, friends, thank you so much for joining me. Oh, I just love, I love our time together. I love how God sends his special ones to be guests on these shows, to really be able for us to see him and what he can do in our lives and what he longs to do. And I love what Brian said. I don't get it right all the time. Well, who does? If Paul in the Bible didn't get it right all the time, then it's okay. Here's the thing. Don't hold yourself hostage to the times that you didn't get it right. Find your freedom in Christ. Run in him. He's already forgiven us before we ever messed up or before we ever even think that we messed up. God says, when Jesus said when he died on the cross, it is finished. It is finished for all of us. We can now run free in that finished work of his and just live from day to day with a new song in our hearts. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Remember, we began a great conversation today, so go tell everyone you know about Brian and his music. Everyone will be blessed by it. I'll see you next time, everyone.